Welcome everyone, this is Dr. Clark in the Center for Weight Loss Success. Today on Losing Weight USA, we're going to talk a little bit about estrogen, menopause, and weight gain. And all women will go through menopause at some point. And there is almost every woman in the world has noticed that, gee, when I go through menopause, it became harder to maintain weight, or gee, my weight started sneaking up. And this is a very real phenomenon. It's not in your head or something along those lines. So we're going to talk about how does all the sex hormones really fit into this, and how do they affect weight gain? All right, well, welcome to Losing Weight USA, real-time answers to your weight loss questions, some of the latest updates, well as a little bit of expert advice. It gives you direct access not only to me, but you should be receiving the health tips and recipes via the membership portal, and I encourage you, get into the membership portal. Keep adding more things in there, from the recipes, the fitness things, all the weight loss tips, if you want to call them that, but also all the educational webinars that we do. If you think of questions during the presentation, just type them in during the presentation. We'll get to them at the end. If you think of things once we're all done, just give us a yell at the Center for Weight Loss Success. The email is success@cfwls.com. Phone number 757-873-1880. All right, let's flip the slides here. I do want to make sure people understand we are in our new space. It's at 711 Brick Kiln Boulevard in Newport News still. And we're all settled in. The store's there. You can stop by, stop by to see us, get your body comp done, all the same things. And we are seeing patients there as well. All right, let's get there. We go. I think we are good to go. All right, so again, we are talking about kind of how do sex hormones, and really it's kind of estrogen in particular and lack thereof, how does this affect weight? Okay, and this is really directed somewhat more to women than men, but really this does affect men as well. Okay. And we'll kind of go through how does this all come about, and it is real. Okay, so is there something about hormones and change in hormones and menopause that makes women gain weight? Right? Pretty much all women going to notice this phenomenon. Almost every woman that has this complaint or has known this or observed this, is it just related to age? Or is it very real? It's not just age, but it's the change in hormones. And the answer is yes, it is the change in hormones, as well as, yes, age does play into this as well. And then how come? Why does this actually happen that way? But it definitely is real. And I say this all the time when we're talking about hormones. Balance is key. So hormone balance is absolutely key. It doesn't matter what hormone we're talking about, balance is key. All right. Now, also what's very important here is when we're talking about hormone replacement, this is a little bit of digression if you want to call it that, is utilizing bioidentical hormones versus synthetic hormones. And bioidentical hormones just means it looks exactly the way your body made it. All human testosterone looks like all human testosterone. So any individual, their testosterone looks exactly the same as the next human. Okay, so it's not like every individual has a different look to it. It's like, no, it's for all humans that testosterone looks exactly the same. Same thing for estrogen, looks exactly the same between individuals. And same thing with progesterone, the three major sex hormones. So bioidentical hormones means it looks exactly the way your body made it. Versus synthetic hormones. Synthetic hormones don't look exactly the way your body made it, which means there may be a little extra side branch on there, such as a little extra hydrogen molecule on there, sometimes an OH or an oxygen hydrogen or a COOH. So these other things may be a little side branch. And when that occurs, And if that occurs, that will make it a synthetic hormone, meaning it doesn't look exactly the way your body made it. So it changes two things. One is the way it actually it connects to the receptor in our body, as well as how it's broken down. And subsequently, then this can lead to potential other problems. Whereas bioidentical hormones look exactly the way your body made it, therefore your body reacts the way they've always reacted to those hormones, and they're broken down exactly the way your body has always broken down those hormones. So there is a difference. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because realize that most pharmaceutical companies don't have bioidentical hormones. They don't produce bioidentical hormones. They produce synthetic hormones. And the reason for that is financial. And that pharmaceutical companies can't patent something that occurs in nature. So if they make it look a little bit different than what occurs in nature, now they can patent it. And if they patent it, then they subsequently can make money off of it as opposed to not being able to patent it. So it's a big financial thing that the pharmaceutical companies will tell you, oh, they're no different than bioidentical hormones. But the answer is yes, they are different. So what are hormones? Again, quick review. Hormones are just chemical messengers. That's all they are. The chemical messengers that communicate between one part of your body to another part of your body. So only the tissues that make the hormones, then they produce the hormones, they release them into the bloodstream, and subsequently then these hormones will travel through the body and will attach to a receptor on whatever tissue has that receptor. Then it'll react and it sends it a message. And that message, may be a little different depending on what tissue it connects to. But the hormone is made by a certain tissue, say thyroid, ovary, testes, whatever it is. And then the receptor will be in a different tissue. It can potentially be the same tissue too, but it can also be a different tissue, brain, breast, uterus, whatever tissue. It's got a receptor that then that hormone is telling it a message is what it is. And it's kind of a lock and key type of thing, so that it fits exactly the way it is and sends the right message. And hormones are one of the main tools that our body uses to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis, again, is another way of saying balance. Okay? So hormone balance is always a key concept there. Now, we're mainly talking about the sex hormones today, which is testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. That's what we're going to hit. Okay. Other hormones, similar concept though, like cortisol, thyroid hormones, they're very important in our body, but we're not really talking about those today. So all the sex hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, they're derived from cholesterol. So it's kind of one of those things. We can't live without cholesterol. Cholesterol is very important. This is just one of the reasons. There are lots of other reasons cholesterol is very important too. And the sex hormones then include, again, testosterone, progesterone, and then estrogen. And humans make three types of estrogen, and we refer to them as E1, E2, E3. The big names for those are estrone, E1, estradiol, di meaning two, so E2, and estriol, the tri means three, so E1, E2, E3. And men and women they share all of these hormones. So very important for both men and women. So the only difference is kind of the absolute and relative amounts of each of them within our body. Okay. All right. Now, again, all three of these hormones start from cholesterol molecule, and then they're transformed into into their other hormone themselves, progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen. Okay. So kind of they go through a similar pathway, the change, and so they're very closely related. So it's not like they're completely different, but they do have different functions then as well, but they are closely related. Testosterone actually is one of the most important hormones for both men and women. And one little comment that I like to make about testosterone is actually, when we think about it, testosterone being just a male hormone. That's not true. As if I could measure all of the testosterone that was made in a woman's body throughout her lifetime and compare that to all the estrogen that was made in the woman's body, a woman actually makes more testosterone than estrogen throughout their lifetime. And again, we often think of testosterone as a male hormone, but it's actually extremely important for females. All right, now both male and females, again, we're concentrating more on females today, but male and females, testosterone levels tend to decrease as we get older. Okay? And for women and men, it tends to start decreasing in their kind of late 20s, early 30s. And that's pretty normal. That's not something weird or anything like that. Now, for women, childbearing influences this, meaning that the more children women have, and the earlier they may have had children, their testosterone levels tend to fall even more and sooner. Okay? And that affects tremendously how one feels. Testosterone is what I'll refer to as your feel-good hormone, because it influences how well you sleep, how much energy you have, your libido, thinking clearly, joint pain. It affects so many different things. Depression, it affects all these different things. It's because there are testosterone receptors on just about every single tissue in the body. The brain is some of the most, the heart is some of the most, all the muscles have a lot, but just kind of all the nerve system, it's very dependent on testosterone. And testosterone levels decrease during our lifetime, that both male and female. Childbearing affects this in women, then much more too. All right, so again, testosterone is not just a male hormone. It's made mainly, for the men, it's in their testicles. Okay, for women, it's mainly in the ovaries, but also the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands can make some testosterone as well as the ovaries. So in women, testosterone is critical to optimal functioning of many systems. Now, sex drive is just one of them, but also heart health, bone health, muscle mass, and just that overall sense of well-being, which then means, how relaxed I am, am I anxious, do I sleep well, am I depressed? All those things, testosterone affects that. Now, if you were to look at just how much testosterone women have as compared to men, well, men actually do have a lot more testosterone. They have about 10 times as much testosterone as women have. But the real reason that's true is because women are much more sensitive to testosterone. Subsequently, they don't need as much testosterone, but it's not like it's not important for them. No, it's very important for them. The production of testosterone in your body tends to fall by about 50% from the age of 20 to 40. And for any individual, it may happen sooner, may happen a little later, and it may happen faster or slower. But it continues to fall literally throughout your lifetime till menopause. And that's because at menopause basically means your ovaries quit working. And most women notice that because they no longer have cycles. Okay. In the meantime, they may get hot flash and night sweats, all these kinds of things, and kind of other symptoms that go along with that. But the most noticeable thing is, I don't have cycles anymore. Okay, that's obviously the most noticeable type of thing. Now, it drops, so testosterone drops similar to estrogen, falls way off too. But basically at menopause, then it gets to a very low level and stays at a low level. This is true for both estrogen and testosterone. It tends to drop even more after each pregnancy, which, since testosterone influences libido, it's kind of nature's family planning, so to speak, is that typically as libido will drop, the more pregnancies you have, and sometimes the earlier the pregnancies that you've had. Now, you do have to realize, and part of the reason why we say that women make actually a lot more testosterone than do estrogen, because testosterone can actually be converted to estrogen. And this is true in both male and females. And it can be converted to estrogen in the fat cells, which we'll get to in a little bit, why that's important. All right, Another sex hormone is progesterone. I won't spend too much time on this one because that's really kind of the least important one. But progesterone is very important that it acts as the natural antagonist or balancer of the estrogen side of the whole thing. It's kind of the yin and the yang of the female hormone system. Progesterone basically is very minimal in males, okay? But in women, it's very, very important. And it's that relative balance between estrogen and progesterone that can develop, that can influence some of the physical and emotional well-being, or some of the other, when we talk about hormone imbalance, so from premenstrual symptoms and things like that, it's often influences by the progesterone hormone. Progesterone is also made by the ovaries, okay, but also small amounts by the brain and the adrenal glands as well. And receptors are found all throughout the body. So again, it's an important hormone throughout the body. Low progesterone levels, for women that have low progesterone levels, they're at a little higher risk for fibroids, which are little growths within the muscular growths within the uterus itself, as well as endometriosis, and potentially in the long run, uterine cancer. So again, progesterone is a very important hormone, mainly because it balances the estrogen side of the whole thing. Which brings us to estrogen, okay, which is probably the main one when we talk about heading through menopause. So estrogen really then is primarily a female hormone. That doesn't mean males don't have any estrogen. Yes, they do, but not because ovaries made them. The testicles aren't actually making a lot of estrogen. It's like, no, testicles make testosterone, and subsequently then, as the testosterone breaks down, some of it breaks down to estrogen. Okay? So men do require some estrogen, just not very much. You know, if men were to have too much, and subsequently then they can get symptoms from that as well. All right, so again, the adrenal glands and the ovaries, and mainly the ovaries, are each responsible for the estrogen produced in premenopausal women. And in the estrogen receptors, after hormones produced by the ovaries, estrogen receptors are widely distributed throughout the body, meaning it's a very important hormone throughout your body. The receptors wouldn't be there if it wasn't important for the other tissues to receive it. Okay? So we find it in the brain, the breast, the bone, certainly the reproductive organs, but all throughout the blood vessels as well. And so estrogens obviously are very critical for sexual maturation. So as you go through puberty, you start having cycles. Okay, that's estrogen. Okay, that kind of goes way up during go through adolescence into adulthood. In adult women typically make three primary estrogens. I mentioned them earlier. Estradiol is actually the most important one, but it also make estrone and estriol. And these are the ones, they start to influence kind of weight and how you feel, the ratios, the balance of them as women approach menopause. And again, this is very real. So estradiol, again, is the most important one. It's the strongest of the estrogens. It's the main hormone produced by the ovaries. And it's that balance of estrogen and progesterone that kind of goes back and forth a little bit, that really occurs during a normal monthly cycle. Disturbances in the ratio can lead to symptoms. So whether you want to call premenstrual type of things, but they can lead to some of the symptoms of the anxiety, the emotional changes, insomnia. So kind of poor balance again. Now, estradiol levels remain fairly steady into the 30s and 40s. And that's what usually cycles are pretty normal into the 30s and 40s. And then become a little more erratic. And in the late, or sometimes early 40s, but in the later 40s, eventually you get bigger surges, bigger falls, and become more erratic. And eventually, when you hit menopause, the average age of menopause is 51. So they fall dramatically. During the menopause, again, just means the ovaries quit working. So those hormone levels go way down. Estrone, okay, is for the next strongest estrogen. It's produced by conversion of the estradiol in the tissues. So the estradiol is produced by the ovaries, sent out through all the tissues in your body, but then it's produced by the estradiol be converted to estrone. And estrone then becomes the main postmenopausal estrogen. This is important, that estrone again becomes the main post-menopausal hormone there. We'll get into that in just a minute. Estradiol is the weakest one. It's normally very important during pregnancy, helps maintain pregnancy, and it can block some of the effects, some of the stimulatory effects that estradiol has on both breast tissue as well as uterine tissue. So menopause, what happens in menopause? Basically, menopause means the ovaries quit working, so they're no longer producing the estrogens. So the total estrogen, all three of those estrogen goes down, especially estradiol. And estradiol, again, can only be made by the ovaries, so that the estrone actually can also be made by fat cells. Okay? So what does this have to do with your weight? We're finally getting there. Okay. So the main way that sex hormones, all three of them, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, affects your weight is it affects and influences a very critical enzyme used in fat storage. And that enzyme, we've talked about this enzyme in the past with insulin, okay, because insulin turns this enzyme on as well, is lipoprotein lipase, or LPL. Lipoprotein lipase, very important in fat storage. And if you look at all, fat movement, we can call it both fat movement into cells and out of cells. But LPL, or lipoprotein lipase, is kind of the gatekeeper for fat accumulation. Any cell that uses fatty acids for fuel or stores fatty acids as fat uses LPL to make this possible. The more LPL activity, the more lipoprotein lipase activity on the cell, the more fatty acids that cell will absorb. So on a fat cell, the more LPL activity on that cell itself, the more fatty acids are stored in the cell, and the fat cell becomes larger. So that's when more fat storage there. So LPL kind of turns on fat storage, especially in fat cells. Now, the primary influence and regulator of LPL is insulin. Okay, and we talk about this all the time, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But just realize that insulin is the primary regulator. But another significant regulator of LPL, lipoprotein lipase, are the sex hormones. And so the sex hormones do influence the LPL activity. Testosterone actually suppresses LPL activity, especially in the abdominal area. So, as we age, both men and women, as the testosterone levels go down, which is a normal part of aging, then we lose that suppressive effect. And so LPL activity becomes more influential. Okay? So as both men age and women age, testosterone levels tend to decrease, and they tend to develop they gain more weight, more easily gain weight, but also it tends to be in the mid-abdominal area. And it's kind of okay, men develop a little beer gut, if you want to call it that, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's that testosterone levels lowering. So you're losing that suppressive effect. All right, well, what about progesterone then? We don't talk a whole lot about progesterone, but progesterone actually influences LPL activity significantly in women. Now, men have very little progesterone level, so it doesn't influence them very much. Well, for women, it does. Progesterone increases the activity of LPL, and it's mainly in the hips and buttock area, which is why as women develop from adolescence into adulthood, women are much more prone to developing hips Okay, part of that is getting ready for childbirth and all that kind of thing, but part of that is the progesterone level helps influence that. So it's typically more in the hips and buttock area that progesterone tends to increase weight gain or fat storage. Okay. Estradiol, on the other hand, okay, estrogen is the other hormone we're talking about. So estradiol, on the other hand, actually also tends to decrease LPL activity, just like testosterone did. So it's somewhat of a protective from gaining weight, estradiol. The exception to that is if estrogen levels are really, really high. If estrogen levels are really, really high, then it tends to just make you gain weight like crazy. But estradiol in normal amounts tends to actually decrease LPL activity. Why is that important? Because in menopause, then the estradiol levels go way down. And it's this decrease in estrogen secretion then that, since you lose that protective effect, as you lose that suppressive effect, that it tends to make you more likely to gain weight. And it also tends to be somewhat in the abdominal area and hip area. Estrone. Okay. Estrone, on the other hand, can actually be very easily made by fatty tissue. So that's one of the things. Estrone, a little bit by the ovaries, but estrone can actually be made in a large amount, fairly large amount, in fatty tissue. And it also increases LPL activity. So if it increases this LPL activity, and that's estrone, E1, increases LPL activity, it leads to more fatty deposition. So during menopause, you lose the protective effect of both testosterone and of the estradiol. But you then kind of get the wrong effect, and the estrone levels tend to actually go up during menopause. So now it makes it even easier to store fat. All right, now, how is this influenced by diet? Well, just as we would suspect, carbohydrate-rich meals also tend to increase LPL activity, especially in fatty tissue. Now, interestingly, fatty meals actually do not tend to increase LPL activity. It doesn't mean you can't gain weight with really fatty meals. Yes, you can, but it doesn't actually make the LPL levels go way higher. Okay. Another interesting finding is that in anyone that's overweight, so someone who is obese, with a lot of extra weight, they also tend to have higher LPL activity in the fat cells. Which, if you think about that, what that really means is that the larger a person is, makes it even easier to gain weight. So the same amount of food eaten by someone who's larger versus someone who's very thin, it may actually make it easier for that person, the larger person, to actually gain more weight. And this, if you just observe around you, you realize that that's probably very true. But many of you listening to this realize that, yeah, the bigger I got, the easier it was to gain weight. The smaller I got, okay, smaller people often have the harder time actually gaining weight. Here's part of the reason. All these things are very real. So in summary then, okay, hormones, menopause, weight gain, they're all closely related. The bottom line is that they are all closely related. Age and hormone changes, as well as loss of lean body mass, has a lot to do with it. As women approach menopause or go through menopause, estradiol decreases, estrone increases, testosterone decreases, and all of these things make it a lot easier to store fat. And it's that influence on lipoprotein lipase and that activity there. So what can potentially help this? You may want to consider bioidentical hormone replacement. Now, bioidentical hormone replacement doesn't necessarily make you lose weight, but it certainly helps prevent the loss of that protective effect. Okay? And so subsequently, it can be, in the long run, can actually be very helpful. All right, so that's kind of what we also do at Center for Hormone Health and Wellness, which is part of Center for Weight Loss Success. And we have the email there. Email is Center for Hormone Health and Wellness if you want more information. You have a long webinar talking about hormone replacement. And the phone number, 757-223-0940. That's 757-223-0940. Or www.centerforhormonehealthandwellness.com. All right, very good. I've finished this off little cartoon. If you're not looking at then you're just listening to this, I'll describe it to you. Basically, it's a woman sitting with her doctor, and she's stating to the doctor, "Can you give me something to make my hot flashes hotter, hot enough to melt fat, burn calories, and ignite passion?" If it only were so easy. Question, I don't see any questions sitting out there, but it is a very important subject. One, from a weight perspective, an overall health perspective, but also two, there is something we can do about it. And certainly if you're considering kind of hormone replacement, I'm definitely saying you need to consider bioidentical hormone replacement, not synthetic hormone replacement. The risks go up with synthetic hormone replacement. Bioidentical, your body knows how to utilize it, and it knows how to break the hormones down. Very, very important in the long run. All right, if you think of questions, you know where to find us here at Center for Weight Loss Success. Again, new address, same phone number, same email, same website, all that's just a new address now, 711 Brick Kiln Boulevard, Newport News, Virginia. But do encourage you, stop by, get your body comp done, log into the membership site. You should be receiving the health tips and weekly recipes. Tune in each Tuesday, 12:15 for the next webinar. Watch your email for the invite and link. And remember, it's your life. Make it a healthy one. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.